so I'm going to change gears. He's been really silent down here, Mr. Rick Todd from the South Carolina Trucking Association. And I'm going to pick his brain here for a topic that I know that he's really been working hard on behalf of the trucking industry with, and hopefully he can give some information on that. And kind of one of the things on that is something called tort reform. And tort, just kind of a little definition, it's when an act occurs that causes some type of physical injury or a loss of property, where that injured party is entitled to some type of compensation. And so I know that he's been working diligently with our state legislature, and they're trying to do some things to push tort reform for the trucking industry specifically, that, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Rick, that they're not trying to take liability away from somebody if they're truly negligent, but to make sure that the damages and the negligence are congruent with one another. Does that make sense in what we're trying to accomplish with that?
Yeah. So thank you for the invite. I am at the private sector. We've got our friends with the state government and the federal government here. We're a membership-based organization, trade association. You have to pay taxes and you have to do all this stuff. They're telling you have to do, but you don't have to be a member of our association. We love where you to be. We're a great resource, and the reason I've been so quiet is because I don't have to say anything, because they're saying all the right stuff. And we want, as an association, we're about 90 years old, and I've been there half the time. I literally have been there half of my existence. It's my 45th year, and the reason we have a state transport police instead of every law enforcement agency in the state touching your trucks is because we went to the legislature working with what was before the DPS even existed, and said we need a specialized, cross-trained unit for commercial motor vehicles because they regulate the industry. And we had it, and we have a great partnership with them. I rarely get calls from my counterparts in other states complaining about our state transport police. So that's kudos to you. The reason we have a motor carrier services directorate is because we went to the legislature and said you're underfunding DMV, and we're getting phone calls all the time, and instead of me being quiet at forums like this, I'm having to act like I'm on a warpath. So they funded what will be business class service, and we're seeing it already starting to manifest itself. So having said that, in my realm, if I could be quiet, life's good. But that's a great question, and it's a very complicated question. When you talk about tort reform, people's eyes glaze over. If you're not a lawyer, and I'm not, but I've got 45 years worth of fingerprints on the state code, you don't understand all these terms like joint and several liability and contributory negligence. Some of the things that we're working on specifically with a Senate Bill 533, write that down. I think you will want to contact your local legislators. Right now, particularly your senators, because as the captain mentioned, we've got close to 24,000 motor carriers, South Carolina domiciled, and 65% of them are one truck. So they're either owner-operators or they're just no small business that is compelled to have that vehicle for whatever reason. Most of them probably don't want to have that vehicle. They don't want the liability. They don't want to have to deal with drivers. They don't want to have to deal with insurance or compliance and all that goes with it, taxes, you name it. Have any of you ever noticed, they're kind of rare, but have you ever noticed lawyer advertising? Decades ago, the Supreme Court said it's freedom of speech, lawyers can advertise their services. And it's been Katie bar the door ever since. And because of some activist Supreme Court decisions here, our state, the Supreme Court back in 88, maybe 90, flipped our contributory negligence doctrine to what they were proposing was the more fair doctrine, and that is a comparative fault, which everybody pays their fair share of damages if an accident occurs. Contributory negligence before that meant if you were a plaintiff who'd been injured, but you had any fault whatsoever, you were barred from recovery. Well, that's a little harsh, But what we have now is the exact opposite, because the legislature hasn't properly codified the statutes so that the apportionment of fault, proper and fair apportionment of fault, has not been codified because of the disproportionate influence of the injury lawyers. And so what we have is the opposite of contributory negligence. We have, you can be 1% at fault. They'll dig and find anything they can to say that trucker was 1% at fault, or a fraction, 1% of fault. And then you can be held 100% liable. And so that's a bad system. It's not fair. Life's not fair. But if you have no insurance in your car and you run into somebody else that has no insurance, then you're just kind of out of luck. It's bad and it's tragic. But life's not fair, so people should be responsible. And we as an industry, we're a target industry. Commercial motor vehicles are target industries. Just look at the billboards. I don't have to explain that to you. And as such, when you're in an accident and the other side hires an attorney, which 9 times out of 10 now people will, because they've been brainwashed. Or maybe the insurance company's not cooperating, or maybe the carrier is not. So if they do hire an attorney, they're going to get 40%, 40+% of whatever damages are awarded. So the perverse incentive exists for them to go after the trucker who they know has at least a certain amount of insurance, settle everybody else out, and then shift all that fault back. So that if they put 50% at fault, then they're held liable for all damages. And then there's some exceptions in there. You know, reckless is subject to the interpretation of a jury. And we all know if you're driving, you don't intentionally run over somebody. Now, you may do something stupid. You may be momentarily inattentive. You might have the best night's sleep, got drowsy. You may look at your phone. You may scratch your head. You may turn around and say something. But if you cause an accident, then they're going to try to turn whatever you've done, whether you got a citation for it or not, or whether you've got a vehicle inspection record that had nothing to do with that accident, that might not be that good to the jury, which is ignorant of what you do, how many miles you run, how many components can break. They're going after you and try to paint you as a bad actor, and so the insurance company said, "Look, we need to settle this thing." And so that threat of reckless, which could bring punitive damages, and I would submit rarely are accidents really caused by a reckless driver, maybe inattentive, maybe negligent, not reckless, not enough to punish the employer for what that driver did, because most of the time that driver action or conduct is on his own, not endorsed or sanctioned employer. But now, just a long answer. Being so quiet, I know waxing on.
You get it all in.
This subject is very complex.
Sure.
No, I've been, like I said, been doing it a long time, and I've never heard one of our members, a fleet owner, regardless of size, even suggest, or even in their tone of voice, or even imply, so what, they've got insurance. They all care, and they're traumatized by it, they worry about it, it can bankrupt them, and the drivers, I mean, heaven forbid I would be a driver and accidentally kill somebody. So that's traumatic. You know, there's
Sure.
another victim in that too.
Sure.
So we're trying to just right the ship and fix it. We've got other states who have fleets who don't have the same exposure that we do here in South Carolina. And it's a competitive world. And so my job is to try to do everything we can to create operating conditions in the state so that South Carolinians' names are on the doors of those trucks that are going to be here regardless. And South Carolinians are driving those trucks. So, point I was getting ready to make, but I got off on another tangent. Can you imagine being an insurance carrier? Nobody likes insurance carriers, but if you are an insurance carrier and you're trying to figure out how much premium to charge a small business with no real track record of maintenance or safety, or knowing drivers are drivers, they make mistakes because they're human, how do you price in a nuclear verdict exposure? How do you price in excessive settlements like Parker had to settle for? You can't. So they tried. So what's happening is commercial automobile insurance premium increases because of all this exposure are driving other insurance markets because, you know, all that insurance money, if they write all kind of lines of insurance, they're trying to end up pooling all that risk and all that premium and having some of it subsidize the other or one make up for the other. So we're driving what's going on with commercial auto risk across the country. Is driving insurance inflation. We call it social inflation. So that's
Okay.
kind of.
So that's kind of where we're at.
Bridget can talk all that long time.
So that's kind of where we're at with that legislation. Keep your, you know, your eyes and ears open to that, and if you feel so inclined to reach out to a representative, I'm sure Mr. Todd can provide you some information post thing on that. I also want to touch with you, this is something that has touched the DMV, and this is something that the South Carolina Trucking Association also is a partner in, and it's the South Carolina Highway Heroes. And what that is, if you're not familiar with that, that's part of the group of the Truckers Against Trafficking. And human trafficking is a huge, huge issue inside the United States. We had an incident last December in one of our branch offices. Everybody's coming to the DMV and you get that little ticket, right? It says, you know, now serving number 36 at window 5 or whatever, you know. So we had a young lady come in with a little older gentleman and had got that ticket. And when the ticket number got called, she went up to the window, she slid it across to our specialist standing there. And the specialist happened to look at the ticket and the young lady had written "help me" on the ticket. That specialist ended up getting an award from the agency. She did a tremendous job of remaining calm, took their paperwork, went through it like she normally would, said I need to go and make some copies of this type of things, and she acted like she was writing stuff, and she went back and kind of gave her manager the wink nod, and they walked off in this room like she was going to make copies. And she said I had to pull myself together at that point, because then I could let down. But she identified that something was going on with this young lady. The manager then went ahead and called the police department to come there. She went back to the counter, gathered herself, and calmly, like, okay, I'm looking at some stuff here, I'm getting your documentation. Just kind of slow rolled it a little bit to give the police time to get there. The gentleman said, well, this is taking too long, I'm gonna go outside and have a smoke. That was the break. He went outside to have a smoke. The young lady broke down at the window, and our specialist said, I'm helping you. The police are on their way. Stay right here. Do not leave this window. And the girl's just in tears. The police showed up, ended up arresting that man. They took the young lady and took her back to one of the back offices. And then the rest of the story happens after that. With the South Carolina Trucking Association, there's my story to get around to what we're talking here. But human trafficking, as we know, is a huge, huge issue inside the United States and globally. Sadly, the United States is one of the biggest users and suppliers of human trafficking. Through the DMV, through trucking, through what the South Carolina Trucking Association can offer with training and things and that, to stop human trafficking, there is something that we all can do. We can become a part of that. Your business can become a partner with that. And I don't know if Rick wants to go more into it, but their website has a link where you can become certified in this and helps you identify, tells you what to do if you see it, and become a part of the national movement for Truckers Against Trafficking. And I don't know, Rick, if you want to say a few more words on that.
Thank you. Real quick. So we're affiliated with the American Trucking Associations. That's our national federation. We're totally autonomous. We're affiliated with ATA. ATA runs a lot of programs. Like, this is National Truck Driver Appreciation Week. Hopefully you know or you're somewhat aware of that. ATA runs that. We promote it. Taryn Shakipka in our office is the point of contact on a lot of things we do. She couldn't be here today, but she's the best resource on that. These organizations have websites. So you've got NTDOL this week, and you've got Women in Trucking, you've got Truckers Against Trafficking. All these initiatives to, one, humanize the industry, but also deploy kind of an extra set of eyes and ears, an army out there, which truck drivers are. They see and are everywhere, and they've done some remarkable things for folks who've been trained in this program to save people and to hopefully deter that kind of activity.
Yeah.
So it's a great partnership, and